Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. We're here today with our good friend Lisa Sharon Harper. From Ferguson to New York and from Germany to South Africa to Australia, Lisa leads trainings that increase clergy and community leaders' capacity to organize people of faith toward a just world. A prolific speaker, writer, and activist, Lisa is the founder and president of freedomroad.us, a consulting group dedicated to shrinking the narrative gap by designing forums and experiences that bring common understanding, common commitment, and common action. Lisa is the author of several books, including one of my absolute favorites, Fortune, How Race Broke My Family and the World and How to Repair It All, which if you've been following my email newsletters, you've seen plenty of excerpts from. She's
Mm.
also written Evangelical Does Not Equal Republican or Democrat, Forgive Us, Confessions of a Compromised Faith, and also The Very Good Gospel, How Everything Wrong Can Be Made Right, which was recognized as a Book of the Year by the Englewood Review of Books. Lisa has been a columnist at Sojourners magazine, has served as an Auburn Theological Seminary senior fellow. She's appeared on many national TV broadcasts, and her writing has been featured in many national publications. Lisa earned her master's degree in human rights from Columbia University in New York City and served as Sojourners Church Engagement Officer. The Huffington Post named Lisa as one of the 50 powerful women religious leaders, and the Religion Communicators Councils named a two-part series within Lisa's podcast the best radio or podcast series of the year. Lisa also contributed to one of our books, How to Heal Our Divides, Volume 2, and we're also going to ask her about her PhD program that she's doing right now. But you can learn all about Lisa's work at lisasharonharper.com. So Lisa, welcome back. It's so good to be able to catch up with you again, and many congratulations on all of your work.
Thank you so much, Brian. It's really great to be back in connection with you as well. I look forward to the convo.
Yeah, same here. Absolutely. What else would you like people to know about you than what I kind of touched on
My
there?
gosh, I mean, you pretty much said it all. I mean, it's at this point, we're all really just kind of getting our bearings, aren't we, in this new era in the United States and honestly in the world. Um, we have seen our nation uh, go through wrenching changes over the last 2 years, since October 7th, 2023, um, when the mayhem in Palestine and Israel began. Um, I feel like we've seen in that time before the election and inauguration of Trump into his second presidency, we actually saw the dismantling of American democracy in the context of that struggle in Palestine and Israel, um, simply by us not abiding by our own laws, and continuing to fund and give weapons to a conflict that was obviously for anybody who was watching it online, and then also determined by the United Nations and every human rights organization to be at the very least crimes against humanity and at the most genocide. And our laws prohibit the funding of such and the resourcing of such atrocities. And yet we watched our government do it. So as we now enter into an era that is naked fascism and naked anti-democratic, we've actually been mourning the death of democracy for quite some time now. So how am I? I'm doing well. I think because, I think there's just a part of me that, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And yet, every time I watch the news, I get more and more angry. And so I've had to cut down on my news
Yeah,
intake.
yeah.
And yet I am following, particularly in written print, because it's not quite so um, uh, inciting,
Hmm.
but not only following, but also organizing. And that's the thing that gives me hope is that we haven't given up. We've had to regroup and analyze where are we now and take different action now. Um, my big question has to do with whether or not people will follow, whether or not people believe enough to continue to follow after such deep disillusionment in November of this year and over the course of the year and a half before, again, with America's involvement in the Israel war against Palestine.
hmm hmm Well, on a happier note, I know we were talking before the recording that you've been doing a PhD program. I'd love for you to
Mhm.
catch people up on what that's been like and where it stands.
Yeah, it's funny. That is actually a happier note. I started this program in 2022, I want to say.
Hmm.
Yes, it was 2022, same time that I launched Fortune. And I had gone for a decade before that, not knowing if I was going to get a PhD. I finally decided to do it. I'm doing it at the VU in Amsterdam through the International Baptist Theological Studies Center, also in Amsterdam. And it's just been incredible. I'm not even Baptist, but they accepted me and they've been very welcoming. But my proposal was accepted recently, which means that now I'm all about the research. It's all research from here on out for the next several years.
And what's the topic of your dissertation? Can you share that with us?
Well, sure. I mean, I'm focused on womanist ethics, and I'm asking the question of resourcing. How do we resource, or is there a new resource for womanist ethical meaning making in television and film? And
Hmm.
that's an area that really hasn't been studied yet so
Hmm.
much. And so I'm really excited because I'm a total film junkie and I love
Hmm.
TV. And this gives me the ability to spend the next few years actually researching something that I love and I would do even without the degree, right? So in fact, I have done without the degree. And so I'm asking the question of how we can actually gain some clarity, some direction in terms of our ethics through Black women characters that are drawn in film and television.
Hmm. Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah.
We'll look forward to hearing about that when you're ready to
Thank
talk
you.
about.
Thank you. I
I knew
appreciate
it'll be a
that.
little while out, but that's okay.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe by then, Fortune will be a film. We'll be able to, utilize her.
Oh, wow. Wouldn't that be
Wouldn't that
cool?
be great? Yeah,
That would
exactly.
be. So let's talk about, I mentioned this earlier. I mean, this is just a phenomenal book, and I've
Mm.
learned a ton from it.
Mm.
Can you talk about how it's gone and, you know, where it stands? I mean, do you have a movie deal?
Oh, no, 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 no movie deal yet. But hey, if anybody wants to come and ask, let's talk. I'm very, very happy to talk. In fact, when I wrote it, I literally wrote it thinking I wanted it to be as visual as possible so that it would have a good chance of actually being made into a film. I think it's worthy of it, absolutely worthy of it, like Roots was worthy of it, right? So,
Yeah.
um, well, Fortune now it's now 3 years old. It's going on, it's 3 years old. Oh
Hmm.
my gosh. Wait, yes, 3 years old this week. It actually came
Is it
out this
really?
week in 2022.
My
Yes,
goodness.
that's
Wonderful.
crazy.
Yes.
So, it has been read by thousands and thousands of people around the world. I'm amazed actually whenever I run into people who have read it. I'm like, oh wow, you read it? And they consistently tell me that it's one of the best books that they've read. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm I continue to be amazed at how the work that you do in private in that room, that writer's room, you know what I'm talking about, where you
Sure.
close yourself off and you're sequestered for however long it takes for you as a writer, and you open yourself to the spirit to write through you, which is my process. I pray and then I move my hands and allow the spirit to write. Um, to know now on the back end of that writing has actually helped people.
Mm.
And I think I've been most surprised actually by how resonant it is for many people of European descent
Hmm.
who've read it and said, I don't know anything about my family. I want to know.
Yeah.
And they've
That was one
gone
of my
in.
reactions too. You know,
Right.
and while I was ill, I did some ancestry work while I was
Yes.
stuck in my home, and it was, motivated by what you had done.
Wow. That's actually like so cool. I'm like literally have shivers right now. I have the chills.
But, for those
Because
who haven't read
yeah.
the book, I mean, the
Hmm.
stories that Lisa was able to research, the stories and the laws and the, things that were going on, centuries ago now, but, all
Hmm.
around slavery in particular were just
Hmm.
amazing to me and eye-opening. So
Hmm.
a lot of things as I said, I learned. I never knew about the motivations, like, for instance, that the law changes so that it created more slaves due to biracial affairs.
Yep.
Um,
And raping.
yeah,
Yeah.
um,
Hmm.
and so there was an economic motivation for the white slave owners to do
Hmm.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
goodness.
And then they legalized it, right? When they realized it was happening, then they
Yeah,
changed the
that's
law
what
to
I mean.
legalize it.
I mean, it's just like, yeah, first it was economic motivation, then it was legal too. Yeah, I mean, it's just like,
Hmm.
oh,
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that in my research with Fortune, that was actually one of the things that blew my mind. I became so clear in the midst of the research, particularly researching not only where were my ancestors and where did they come from and, what were their deals, like their issues or whatever, but also what were the laws that were created in their era that might have had something to do with why they chose the paths that they chose, right? Or how they ended up in the
Yeah.
spaces that they did. And I think that that first generation, first, second, and third generations of Fortune's line are just some of the most fascinating genealogical work I've ever done.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you can see in three generations from her that those initial laws, the very first race laws that were passed in Virginia and Maryland, absolutely shaped her life and her daughters' lives and their sons and daughters' lives. I mean, and it all goes back to the reality that her, Fortune's mother, was a white woman who had an affair with an enslaved African man, Gam, who became known as Sambo Game. And and so that's my 11th generation, Sambo and Maudlin. And uh, what happened to them? Um, it fell squarely in the hairs of the very first race laws. And those race laws were created in order to carve out a noble class in America, an untouchable class in America,
Mm-hmm.
which became white men. Um, very quickly, actually literally 2 years in, it became white men um, because they made it clear that white women were not protected unless they protected white men. And just all of that research ended up just being incredibly eye-opening. And, Fortune doesn't just trace one line of my family. It traces several branches
Yeah.
that are not connected to Fortune's line, but, I guess only through me, right? So the Lawrence line and seeing how Native American identity was shaped and reshaped as a result of the Trail of Tears and, well, the many trails of tears that happened in the early 1800s and with the five tribes in the Southeast, really nations in the Southeast, and how my ancestors did not walk those trails, but rather hid in the hills. And over time, you see their racial identities they shift from being biracial or mulatto, as they said, to white to black by 1900 they're listed as black. It's just amazing. And you have people who are passing, I mean, in that same line, totally passing because they can. Um, and then you have my mom's generation, right? So my mom, who was in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and the stories that she told me of her growing up, and in a not segregated but kind of segregated, it was ghettoized
Philadelphia,
neighborhood.
right?
Right here. Actually, she lived one block from where I live right now. I
Oh,
decided to
wow.
move back into her neighborhood,
Hmm. Hmm.
and so like. knowing her stories now as I walk around my neighborhood. I just took my dog for a walk, right? And walked past, 1 block from her house.
Oh,
It's just
goodness.
really kind of amazing.
Huh.
So, Fortune now is in a stage where I'm actually kind of dusting it back off, and because I do believe that the message, which is a call to truth telling and repairing what this power called race broke in our world, and then the call to beloved community through healing and forgiveness of the things that can never be healed, never be repaired. What does it look like for us to engage in that work in this context,
Mhm.
this growing fascist nation and governance that is anti-Black? I mean, just actively anti-Black and actively trying to reestablish Nazi-like supremacy
Yeah.
of whiteness here
Yeah.
in the United States.
I mean,
What does it
some,
look like to call for truth telling in that context? I mean,
yeah. Yeah.
it's um, it's it's risky, actually, and
Mhm.
at the same time, it's necessary. Absolutely necessary. No more necessary than it is right now.
Well, I'll be curious, to talk with you again probably in a few months, you know what I mean, to see, what your
Hmm.
thoughts are on, because we're going through so much quick dynamic change right now.
Yeah.
And there's a lot
Yeah.
of things that are not clear.
Yeah.
What's your reaction to I'll say the mainstream media's capitulation, obedience in advance, is what it feels like to me to you. I think it's Timothy Snyder's term,
That's right.
Vermont tyranny.
Yeah.
Um, are you seeing that too?
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's been a gut punch, actually, because you would hope that the press, at the very least, the press would be the
Mhm.
press. I mean, the press is the press because it it searches for truth with dogged determination, without loyalty to any party or anyone. It's about uncovering truth. And yet the press has, we've seen it, we saw it again, we saw it in with the whole Israeli conflict, and crimes against humanity being just the difference in the framing, um, the not reporting on particular news. So again, before Trump, we saw this happening in the press. So I think great disillusionment has happened because of that. And now we see with, again, Trump, it's literally naked fascism where you have just outright lying by Trump and his people. And very few press people are actually calling him on it every time.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
so much is slipping through. I mean, I honestly, I literally have prayed for the press. I've prayed for journalists in this time because not only does fascism literally threaten the lives of journalists, and the livelihoods of journalists, but they are in many ways our second to last defense, our second to last defense against a complete takeover of our nation. Um, the last defense will be us ourselves about how much we resist.
Hmm.
I actually think, honestly, that not watching the news right now is a form of resistance. Um,
Well,
it is,
one thing I was
yeah.
going to ask you, I mean, I'm doing less of that too. And,
Mhm.
but there are several Substack newsletters that
Right.
I do read pretty regularly
Hmm.
because they are written by people that are truth telling
Right.
and, at least keeping me and lots of other people aware
Right.
of these
Hmm.
ridiculous things that are going on.
Yeah.
Do you have particular ones that you follow that you would recommend?
Yeah, I mean, well, honestly, for me, I have been following the Washington Post and the New York Times. Every morning I read their titles, the what do you call it? The headlines. I read the headlines. I dive into 2 or 3 articles that interest me. And usually at least one is going to be on a domestic level, one on an international level, and one in culture and editorial. And in terms of Substack, yes. I mean, I absolutely love Nadia Bowles-Weber. I just love her Substack. And so you know, I'm a Nadia fan. And so, she read, we were together recently in Jordan and I would love to talk about this actually. We were at a consultation on Christian Zionism. And the work there will be put into a book. All of the presentations they're actually going to be creating a book on this that will likely come out later this year. And it was amazing. Dr. Mitri Rahab, the president and founder of Dar al-Khalima University out of the West Bank, called together all of the academics, the scholars whose work has been focused on Christian Zionism. And he called them all together for a consultation in Jordan, the nation of Jordan, in the city of Amman, or near Amman, actually on the Dead Sea, near the baptismal site where Jesus was baptized. It was amazing. And he also called together influencers and writers, TikTokers who have been speaking out on this issue of Israel-Palestine. Part of the reason why you hear me talking about it so much is that I just got back from that like a
Yeah.
week ago.
Mm.
And yeah, and I've been to Palestine and like East Jerusalem and Palestine 3 times and the region 3 times in the course of the last 6 months. So I'm just, filled to the brim with
Mhm.
thoughts on that. But more than anything, Brian, what I learned at this consultation with all of these learned people, the thing that resonated the most and hit and stuck was that fact that we have been indoctrinated by a story, the Zionist story, for the last 500 years. This started in the 1600s. Would that be 400 years? 400 years. So 1646 is when one scholar places the beginning of the Christian Zionist project. And it has been woven into every facet of our lives, every stream of Christianity, whether evangelical or mainline, historic Protestant, Catholic, Orthodox, doesn't matter. Everyone has had that story woven into its faith story, even though Jesus says nothing about it. It is something that and it's also been misapplied to the nation of Israel, which the scholars, one after another, just said again and again and again. It's a misapplication of the scripture. In fact, they went as far to say heresy. Several of them, in fact, all of them eventually said this is heresy to think that the nation of Israel here, now, today, the state of Israel is the same as the Israelites in the Old Testament. It's not the same. And yeah, so my work now, after that, after Amsterdam with the PhD work, and also after a retreat that I took with Black women in the evangelical world, is truly to tell a better story. We got to tell a better story, one that is rooted in our faith, in the faith that was born from brown Jesus, who was colonized by a supremacist empire, and when placed on the cross, would not have been seen as fully human by
Mhm.
those who crucified him,
Mhm.
and whose mother Mary proclaimed, "The low will be brought high, and the high will be brought low. There will be a day when those who are oppressed will be set free." And that's what Jesus' life was about. So we need to tell that story. We need to tell a better story. That's what Fortune was actually about, was asking the question of how that better story applies to our lives and our families.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow.
Hmm.
So, one of the platforms, that I lead is called Find Your Next Calling. And,
Yeah.
we were talking earlier about,
Hmm.
where do we go from here kinds of questions that,
Hmm.
uh, what do you do? I mean, obviously pray, but I mean, how do you discern what direction to go in, what path to
Hmm.
take, for
Hmm.
critical junctures in your work?
That's a great question. Actually, I have to say this retreat that I just took with a bunch of Black women, and they're, faith leaders, it was fabulous. 13 of us all together. We went to the Grand Caymans. I've never been there
Awesome.
before. It was fun and it was also restorative, something I really desperately needed. Came back ready to go. Um, but that retreat was for me, I went saying, the reason I'm doing this is because I need time set apart to hear from God.
Mm, mm,
I need time set apart to understand what my marching orders are for 2025.
mm,
Because I mean, Trump is throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? Like
mm.
you got the meatballs, you got you might even have some shrimp mixed up in there, you got your pasta, you got your sauce, you got four different kinds of sauce. Like he's throwing everything at the wall, everything. And all of it is maddening. All of it is just getting my gander up, right? Like it's just like, no. And so I could waste my year chasing Trump's spaghetti, like trying to catch spaghetti off the wall. And I said, I'm not going to do that. I am not going to do that.
Mm,
He is not worth it. Um, and instead, what I decided to do was go and be with my friends and my people and find time for quiet with Jesus. And that's exactly what I got. The first few days were actually just like coming down, like doing fun things and having deep conversations and getting into scripture again and prayer. Oh my gosh, it was so restorative. Then the last day for me was really about listening.
mm,
And so I listened, and what I heard was two things. I heard serve, serve, and I heard serve in the way that I have already instructed you to walk, which is through the lens of Black womanism. I want you to serve through that lens
mm,
when whatever you do. So for me, that's my directive. Now that thankfully it cuts across lots of different things. I can speak into really anything um, and serve the larger body through that lens. But so I'm thinking about this FAA crisis, right? Like the airlines. I'm thinking about um, uh, the DEI vilification that he's
yeah.
done,
Yeah.
right? And I'm thinking about that through the lens of Black women and you know, pushing our story to the center as a womanist, asking, how does this impact us? What does this say? Um, how have we already experienced something like this? Where do we have resources in our quivers to handle this already because we've experienced this kind of fascist work, this anti-Black legislation? And it's drawing me back to, people like Fannie Lou Hamer and Toni Morrison and Alice Walker who wrote as resistance, right?
Mhm,
Fannie Lou
mhm.
Hamer who sang as resistance, um, the leader of, or the creator of Soul Train, who danced as resistance. I swear to you, like in this moment, we are in a moment that's very similar to the years after the death of Dr. King.
Mm,
And it was in those years that the Cultural Revolution really happened. Um, the legislation happened in the 60s. The Cultural Revolution happened in the 70s.
yeah,
And
yeah.
when we could no longer depend on the legislative arm of the movement, then the artists really took over and helped us to dream another world into being. And I think that that's the moment we're in again.
Mm,
We're
mm.
not going to be able to see legislative, most likely, we're not going to see legislative movement unless we win the three special elections that are up right now for the House. There is a very good possibility we could win those. And if we do, then we will actually be able to stop the worst stuff from happening. Um, Trump will not be able to get anything through Congress, and so it'll be a stalemate for 4 years. We will see that, and or likely a stalemate, except for the executive, directives that he does
Yeah, I mean, what's been
for
going
us.
on lately is he's just been bypassing Congress and everything that they
Right.
said need to be funded. As an example, now Musk has got control of the payment systems of the
Right.
government.
Right. That which
So
is really scary. That's like,
no
what?
kidding.
especially since
Yeah.
he's not even a member of government and he has that. But see, even that, like there is a stopgap against that, and that's the courts. So our lawyers are incredibly important right now. The judges are
Hmm.
incredibly important right now. And even the Supreme Court. I mean, there's a possibility that you won't have just a party line vote on the Supreme Court if things get too far out of hand, right? Like there's a possibility of consciences
No.
kicking in. We can hope, right? We can hope. So, so yes, so we have to pray for the courts. We have to pray for our lawyers. We have to pray for the artists, and we have to write. We have to write in this time. So how did I go about that? It's silence, you know. Richard
Hmm.
Foster in his book Prayer, he says in that book that connection happens in silence.
Hmm.
And he's talking about connection with God. It
Hmm.
happens in the silence. And so I knew that I could not go much longer into 2025 without having that time of silence.
Wow. Wow. Well, I guess all I can say is let's stay in touch,
Yeah, let's do that.
and see, how we can support each other, through all of this.
That'd be
That would
great.
be um, a blessing for us all, I think.
Thank you.
Um, well, Lisa, congratulations again on all your work. I wish you the best on everything that you're doing, and we will see this through one way or the other. I know,
We
but
will.
I just hope that and pray for support for your work.
hmm Thank you. I appreciate that. And we welcome it. And we also love our relationship with you and the ways that you've always supported our work. So thank you for that.
Well, again, I want to, do one last shout out for Fortune. I mean, if you have not read this, please check it out. One of the best books that I've ever read. And please go to Lisa's website, lisasharonharper.com. Lisa,
Mhm.
thank you again so much, and all the best.
Thank you, Brian.